reach the dimensions it reached, and Greece was too thirsty to get to the boundaries of the old Byzantine Empire, so they lost a lot of it. Greece in 1919 reached all of Asia Minor, okay, but then they lost it in 1922. And for Turkey, there's a modern Turkish Republic. Turkey has a problem with minorities, even with the Jews, okay, but to say what Turkey did was equal to what the Nazis did to the Jews is not what happened historically. And then to get the Armenians, get all these Jewish historians wound up on both sides, playing against each other, and essentially what they're doing is propagating hate. The Armenians aren't establishing centers all over America and all over the world for genocide education. That's the issue. And the worst thing is that the extremist groups of the Armenians are involved in all these underground activities in Cyprus and the Baca Valley in Lebanon with terror, and I don't want to go into that. But the question is, this alliance is not pure. The Jews should be sensitive to the Armenians. They should be sensitive to what happened in Darfur and what happened in Bosnia. They're not sensitive to that. They should be sensitive to what happened in Cyprus with the Greeks losing part of the island. But also, why did Turkey intervene? Because the Greeks put in the dictatorship from Athens put in a dictatorship in Cyprus. And Greece is supposed to be historically the beacon of democracy. So with behavior like this, what do you think you're going to get? And in terms of Israel, for example, the Armenians, and a lot of times, were on the wrong side. They were in terror with the Palestinians against Israel, and together with trading with the IRA and all sorts of bad boys and all sorts of extremist groups, and Khawatma and Chabash, and also in the 80s with all sorts of Russian backed groups. Today the sides are a little different. But I think there should be a dialogue with the Armenians, and it should be a genuine dialogue, and not propaganda. I'm not so sure the Armenians are willing to hear what the Ottomans say. And as time goes on, the Turks are more accommodating. But what you can't overcome, and this is in every country, there's a certain nationalist chauvinism, which sets the tone. So of course you're going to have a nationalist chauvinism in Turkey. And that same identity also, as a Muslim country, doesn't want to see Muslims being bombed in Gaza. Okay? And they don't want to see Muslims being bombed in Rafiq, which happened a few years ago. In other words, this isn't the first time we've had a problem with Turkey because of our problems with the Palestinians. So, I'm not saying here that Israel should restrain itself, because this isn't the situation. They restrain itself enough, but there's a certain point when you're dealing with people who only want to destroy you, that you can only take enough, and it's time to retaliate. So Turkey did terrible things now to Israeli tourists in Anatolia, and intimidated them and inhibited them. It's Turkey's loss, but Turkey has a lot to be complimented for historically. They accommodated the Jews, they accommodated minority groups. Many of the Grand Viziers, many of the prime ministers were Greek Orthodox. They were Christian. Okay? There was a certain tolerance. But when you say to any regime that you want to whittle down the regime and form a rival country, then you're in for trouble. You're in for a conflict. And that's what happened. So you have the Armenians fighting for their historic state, which they lost previously hundreds of years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, because of their chicanery. And you have the Kurds rivaling for a state. And the Kurds' downfall is their internal fighting and their internal terror. Okay? I've been tough on the Armenians, but you have to understand this in the context of all the rivaling groups. You can't divide Turkey up today and have Turkey as a major country if you're going to give the Armenians a piece and you're going to give the Kurds a piece, etc., etc. What Turkey has done, they've given the Kurds much more cultural autonomy. 20 years ago, it was illegal to speak Kurdish. It was illegal to publish a book in Kurdish. Now you can do that. So it has to be looked in context. Of course, the Armenians would love to have a grand Armenian empire and half of modern Turkey in the eastern side of Turkey. But that's part of the conflict. They brought Russia on to attack Turkey. In one weekend, we don't even know the figure. Maybe probably hundreds of thousands of Armenians defected from the Turkish army with their weapons. Okay, this is a conflict. Okay, you know.
This is in World War One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what would happen in America today if, of all the boys, let's say that just of the American soldiers today, what would happen if all those from the South of the United States wanted to recreate the Confederacy and in one weekend left the American army with their weapons? You can imagine what kind of war there would be. You know, and this wasn't the first time. So you have the whole conflict from 1893 to 1895, which is blatantly and outright genocide. Blatantly, Turkey totally exaggerated, but they don't make the Armenians don't make an issue of this. So what happened in 1915 is stretched way out of proportion. As time went on, the numbers got bigger and bigger and bigger. The British intelligence, in the beginning it wasn't a genocide. Only in the 60s, through the British intelligence, did they start calling it a genocide. Today, you have to call it a genocide. If 100 people are targeted in a planned mass massacre, so it's a genocide. But and again, Turkey did terrible things. But to look at this as if it's the Jewish Holocaust is taking things way out of proportion. And then the Ukrainians also, and the Poles, they also were victims of the Nazis. But to use it in the same way as the Holocaust is to water everything down. And that's the reason why, for example, in Canada, there's no National Holocaust Museum. Because the Jews don't want the whole theme to be watered down by all sorts of ethnic groups. And we don't have an equation. In other words, you can't ignore that all these Poles and all these Ukrainians were killed as a victim. They're also the aggressors. But the question is, where do you put all this together? And that's the tragedy with the Armenians, because it doesn't look well that the Ottoman scholars in Turkey says, well, this is just provocation, because hundreds of thousands of innocent Armenians were the victim, and this is what's important to point out. So whether it's the army or the government or the Turkish people being the aggressors, that's important to point out. But to heat things up the way they do in trickery, this is what isn't acceptable. Stanford Shaw was very apologetic toward the Armenians. At UCLA, they organized a huge demonstration at his class. And what kind of behavior was that? And then, a young man, who I won't give you his name, he put a bomb in his house in Northridge, in the bushes. I mean, so, let's say we condemn what Norman Finkelstein says, but to go after Norman Finkelstein with a bomb, okay, he has the right to say what he says. It's a democratic country. Maybe we think he's a little excessive, he's skewed, but to go after Jewish scholars like that, and the Armenians only go after Jewish scholars. And because the Western world ignores the East, ignores Eastern Orthodoxy, they don't relate to these issues. The Eastern Orthodox don't participate in interfaith dialogue, not with the Catholics and not with the Jews.